We're good to go.
All right, we are live. Thank you for joining us for another installment of Navigating the New Normal at Tech Birmingham. We are going to be doing something a bit different this time. I'm kind of looking forward to this interactive component. So I'm not going to steal the thunder of our dear friend who's going to be introducing and kind of giving you all a lay of the land going forward, but I will say you all are in for a treat. If this is your first time kind of tuning in, or maybe you stumble upon this video after it's been recorded and uploaded, Tech Birmingham, we serve as the voice of the technology ecosystem here in Birmingham. And we launched the Navigating the New Normal web series once this COVID crisis really started to emerge. And we wanted to make sure that we were still meeting people virtually, that we're still offering the resources and
Okay, it seems that
heavy
we're having some technical
to
difficulties.
online content. So, oh, we're having some technical difficulties.
Yes, yes. Okay, say it again.
Uh,
You froze
oh,
up.
you know,
You had a
so
Max
check.
Headroom moment.
So check this out, right? I told you I did not feel good about the internet connection that I had. So let's see if we could do this. I'm going to go away and disappear. And
Magic. Can't hear you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for letting us pivot. We can't hear you, Dion. And today is going to be a little bit different. We're going to do a working demonstration so that we have a better understanding of how AWS works. And so we're going to let Justin introduce us to Chris Chapman, who is going to be facilitating this. And he can give us a little bit of history of Chris and what we're going to be doing today. And I'm going to mute myself. One last thing, if you are interested in a demo AWS URL for today's demonstration, please raise your hand and I will get you a URL for you to follow along.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christina. Thanks for having us. I'm Justin Nelson. I'm a regional security advisor with Trend Micro. We're the world's largest pure play cybersecurity company, and we do a lot to secure the cloud, and we do a lot to secure the cloud specifically to AWS. And so we got Chris Chapman here. He is a partner solution architect for AWS, and he covers AWS Marketplace. And that's kind of where we meet because the solutions that Trend Micro has are available in the AWS Marketplace. And we're one of their ISV or independent software vendors that they work with in the catalog. And so Chris has a focus on management tools. His core focus is helping customers automate AWS infrastructure deployment and provisioning at scale. And Chris was a software developer and an architect with more than 10 years working across many industries, including healthcare, banking, and pharmaceuticals. And today he's going to kind of show us a lot with the service catalog, ECS on Fargate, code commit, code build, code pipeline, and cloud formation. And we're going to get hands-on in this lab, and we're going to learn how to do predefined cloud formation templates for our end users and how they can use those to deploy simple web applications with ECS Fargate via self-provision CI/CD pipeline. Or we're pretty much just going to deploy a Python code in a container and then use that in a cloud formation template to get that on AWS. And Chris has free accounts for everybody, so you don't incur any charges on yours. And I'll let Chris take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, like he said, partner solution architect with Marketplace. So I mainly cover management tools, but I do a lot on DevOps and then how customers can incorporate partners into their larger cloud and on-prem. We're seeing a lot more hybrid. People are going through migrations, or maybe the hybrid, the on-prem and the cloud is the resting point. You don't have to fully migrate. You can leave stuff on-prem and move over. So we have a lot of great partners on AWS Marketplace that can help you with that. They can track you before, during, and after migrations and digital transformations, because it's important to keep that security, your backups, your your cost analysis, all of those things. We have partners that can help us, help you, the customer, do that more readily and more easily on AWS. But then the other half that I cover is management tools and how we do things at scale. So like Justin said, we're going to be looking at a DevOps pipeline. We just went all in on the containers. We're going to try to hit all of the cool, nifty pieces of the cloud today and make that easier, but also look at it from the perspective of, okay, we've got this in place. We need a DevOps pipeline so we can release code, but let's take a step up. Let's look at it from the director or the CIO level and say, okay, what if I've got multiple departments? I've got lots of dev teams. I've got lots of dev projects. How do I enable all of them to be able to use these more readily? And that's where we get into automation, infrastructure as code, and the templating, right? And so what we're going to see today is not only how do we implement this and get a web server or a web API up and running, but we're going to use those exact tools that a development team would use as if it were being deployed to multiple accounts and multiple teams. So this is these pieces can be put in place and then provisioned as needed as projects come up. So, right, new development team, new development project, we need code commit to store our source code. We need some sort of mechanism if we're talking about DevOps. We need to be able to build and then validate that code and then deploy it out to whatever our, in this case, it's containers. So we're going to look at the ECS running on Fargate, which is the AWS managed infrastructure for containers. So you'll see that you don't need to worry about the deployment of all this infrastructure. You can just create the container and then launch it as a service in Fargate, and AWS will handle the scaling, the load balancing, and a lot of that stuff that you would normally have to set up on your own. Additionally, like I said, we're going to be using templates that are immutable and predefined and provided to us through Service Catalog, which is that mechanism for providing tools, ready-made, immutable solutions, infrastructure as code to as many people as needed in order to provision this on demand, or that self-service aspect of the cloud. And that is really the conduit that, you know, speaking of Trend, for example, if you want to include your security into the process itself, but you want to make that transparent to your end users, then this is really the way you would go about that. Another way to look at it is if you're looking at it from cost exploration, cost analysis, you really need to be tagging your assets. You want to know what they are, and you want to take that off of your end users. Your end users shouldn't be worried about all of those, the security, the logging, the tagging that goes into it. They just want to provision the web server. So bake that into a predefined template and then offer that template to your end users who can then provision that as needed. So that's really what we're talking about today. And to get started, let's see here. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna, if you're following along, if you missed my message earlier, so we've got some sample or some event accounts that are they're burner accounts for AWS, so they'll last for about 6 hours today. And you can play around with those and follow along as we're going. You could also do this in your own account if you wish. There will be cost associated with that on you, but we're going to go through and do all this with templates, so you'll be able to shut all that down at the end of this if you do want to spin this up in your own account. To start off, we're going to need a few things in place first, the first of which is going to be our sample application. So I'm putting that into the chat window. I think everyone should be able to download that. So this is just a Python Flask app. It's got a custom C binary behind it. So really we can get into maybe more complicated than needs to be for this particular exercise, but I wanted to be able to show everyone how we can build something, how we can validate it, and then we can deploy it. And a lot of people, you might just be at the, I just need a Python web app or a Java or Node or something like that. Not all of these are compilable languages. So I want to be able to hit all those steps in the process and show you what that would look like. So that's why we're going to use this sample application. Really, the application is not the point of the story today. We just need something to run. So then the next thing, and I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see here. That is the, yeah. Okay, so we should see a GitHub window up here, I believe, right? We need to go to, and this was the link that we had in the email. So we need to go to the reference architecture for service catalog, and inside there is a ECS section. Let me see if I can pop this back into the chat. Let's see here. Now I've lost my chat window. Well, raise your hand if you don't have the link. I'm not finding my chat window now. Oh, there it is. All right. Boom. There's the link in the chat window. All right. So you should be able to download, and then yeah, I am sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
I can see your screen, Chris.
Okay, great. So we need to sign into our account, either the test account that you've been given, or if you're following along in your own account, let's go ahead and sign into that. And then we need to pull up this window here with the reference architecture and the ECS section, which you should see on the screen here. So then we're going to go down in here, and we're just going to do this launch stack button. Make sure, middle click, right click. We want to open this in a new tab because we might want to come back to this page here. And that should drop you off here into the CloudFormation console. And I can dive in. We're going to blow through a lot of these things pretty quickly. So let's get this up and running, and then I can circle back around for questions, because some of this will take a few minutes to get up and running, and we want to make sure that we have that ability to run this here. So once we're here, let's go ahead and hit next. We can pretty much do all of the detail, or the defaults here. I'm coming in as a admin account, so I'm going to type in my account name here. I do not know offhand what the Event Engine account is. You can leave that blank for right now. Might need to spin one up myself because I don't know what that role name is for the event accounts. But everything else we can leave alone. And we're just going to hit next. We're going to hit next through this window. I'm going to scroll all the way down. There's going to be a blue box. We want to make sure we check both of those boxes there. We're going to go ahead and create that. And you will, if you're using a blank account, you won't have anything else in this window. You'll just have this portfolio spinning up, which if we refresh, we'll see stuff happening there. So did anyone have any trouble so far in doing that, logging into the sample account and then executing this CloudFormation template? Okay, 404 error on the Event Engine login or the CloudFormation. Oh. Oh, sorry, I'm not using a clean account. I'm going to have to restart this. You can ignore this for a second. I'm using one of my own accounts here, so it's there's some stuff that's already in there. specifically, if you're watching my screen here, I already have the end users created. So CloudFormation was just telling me that it can't create that again, which you will not have that issue if you're in a clean account, like one of the event accounts. I'm going to fire that off again. And this is kind of the nice thing about just templates in general, infrastructure as code and CloudFormation. Some of you might be familiar with Terraform. I think the Microsoft version of this is Blueprints. There's a lot of different ways to do infrastructure as code here. But one of the best parts about it is you can launch and you can roll back things, especially when we look at CloudFormation. It will try to put things in place. If there's a conflict, it's going to tell you that. It'll roll it all back, and then you can delete it. So this just makes life a lot easier instead of clicking around in the console. Oh man, I'm gonna get. It's one of those days, isn't it? I'm gonna stop sharing just for a second here, clean this up. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow along with one of these test accounts. That way we can see what's going on. Is the last test account being used right now? I'm just going to grab that one, number 30.
No, number 30 is available.
Okay, I'm going to grab that one. Then we can just follow along. I had this already running in my account, and that's just going to problems. Plus, I think it'll be easier for people to see. Okay, let me go back to sharing here. Okay, so now you can follow along with me on, if you can see my screen. I'm gonna go back. So you should have been through here. You clicked on the link. We're gonna go to AWS console. We're gonna want this right here. Oh yeah, I gotta log out of my current one. Now let's try it again. There we go. And if we go to, okay. Yeah, so you should be able to see up here this team role master key. That's our role that we came in here. We're actually going to need that for our launch stack button, or our launch stack thing. Let's see here. Let's go into, so I think a lot of you have already executed that CloudFormation. I'm going to grab the name of this here. Just copy the whole thing. And if you've already done this, don't worry, I'll circle back with you, and we'll get that updated. I'll show you how to update that. So if you haven't done the CloudFormation, we're just clicking on that link in the GitHub. We're going to add that team role to linked role 1. We're going to leave all the other defaults. Then we're going to check our blue boxes, and we're going to create that stack. Okay, so any questions on that? I'm going to bring that chat window back up so I can see. Okay, good. So Bobby was able to get in. Anyone else having issues getting in? Getting this up and running, we should see a couple things happening, some nested stacks in there.
Also, a message for the audience. If you wanted to ask questions in the chat box, there's also a Q&A if you also wanted to add questions in there. And Chris, it looks like Ben Ward is saying that he's getting, I'm getting stack already exists. I think I messed up the role the first time trying to clear resource and repeat.
Okay, yeah. So if that's the case, then you want to go into the stacks, and you want to find the easiest way to do this is to turn off, if you're watching my screen, turn off that nested view. Find the main stack, which should be exactly this, SCRA ECS portfolio. Just click on that and hit delete, and then wait for it all to clear out. And then just rerun it. And when you do rerun it, add in that team role. So here, I'll put that into the chat. Team role. So that will just, in a minute, you'll see why that's important, but into that linked role 1. So that just enables Service Catalog to, it enables you, the role you came in as, to use Service Catalog. So if anyone is here already, where the stacks are all complete, we see everything on my end here has created while we were talking there. If you did not get that team role in there, this is another nice thing about, again, templating infrastructure as code. We can make updates to large deployments fairly easily. So if we've got the parameter in there, we can go ahead and change that. So if we click on that portfolio there, then you come up here to update. And what we can do is just use the current template. And down here, you can add that role name in here to linked role 1, and then hit next and go through the whole process. In fact, if you do this, I'm just going to go ahead and do it to show you here. Again, make sure you check the blue boxes. If we update this stack, it's going to look at everything. It's going to say, hey, there was nothing there that changed. So we'll just get a update complete. Because there's nothing there for me to change, but for you, it'll probably, yeah. So it's updated everything. It will, you'll be able to see that in the parameters. We'll see that that linked role 1 is the team role. So any questions so far? I'm going to move to the next area here now and introduce you to another service called Service Catalog. So if we go up here to this, this top section here, we can do a drop down on services, and you can type in Service Catalog. You should start to see that. You can find it somewhere down in here. It's easier usually just to search for things. Let's go ahead and click on that. And we'll start exploring some of the stuff that got created here in that CloudFormation, which you can see a lot of it if we go back to CloudFormation. With all these stacks, if you expand this here, we can see we've got a number of nested things in here. We've got a few products, we've got our end users, and some roles. So let's see how all of that looks inside of Service Catalog. So 2 things on Service Catalog. First, there's the administration view. So normally in a production environment, you would be either the administrator or the end user. For this particular exercise, we're going to be both. And that just makes it easier for us to not have to sign in and out and switch roles and all that stuff. We could just be both personas at the same time. And we can see more of the process working as opposed to the differentiated roles and what might happen there. But we'll see, we've got a portfolio. If we're in the admin view, we can click on the products. We've got a number of products in here. We've got a service, a task, a code pipeline, and a cluster. So now let's switch over. Let's change our hat from the administrator. We're going to put on our end user hat. So this would be maybe the a dev team manager, whoever needs to spin up this code pipeline and the cluster and the resources. So that could be a number of different people. Maybe it's one of your ops people. Maybe it's your dev team manager, however you distinguish that. Let's go into products now. So that's going to change us over to the end user view. And if we put that team role in our CloudFormation stack, at this point, we should see, like I do here, our 4 products on the end user point of view. And we need to fire off 2 of these right away so that they can get up and running. The easiest one is this Fargate cluster. This just creates the initial bit of infrastructure to run containers on AWS in that in that managed environment. So AWS is handling all the resources for you in the infrastructure. So to do that, we can either click on the product name or you can click on the dots. We just want to do launch product. So I'm going to click on the name here. It's going to take us to the product screen. This is where Service Catalog, you can set up departments and distribution, some email stuff, and then maybe you've got an internal wiki that tells your company about what all these different products do, right? So you can supply all of that to your end users. And that's kind of, we're building infrastructure templates with our end users in mind because they're the ones that will be needing to self-provision this. And that's really kind of the heart of the cloud is bringing that self-provisioning aspect to the people who really need the resources. So we're going to go ahead and just launch our product here. We'll give it a name. We can call it whatever we want. I'm going to call it my cluster because I'm super creative in my naming schemes. And we've only got one version in this, so we can, if we have time, we can get into the templates that are running all this. But again, all those templates are available in that GitHub repo. So then we just hit next, and normally there would be parameters there if we need to make some decisions about what we want to run. You'll see some of those later. For this cluster, I've boiled it down so that really there's only one thing. There's no parameters that you really need to know about. So this is one of the most easy products to launch. There's no knowledge required from the end user. We can just hit next. Don't check any of the boxes. Just hit next and go through all this. We'll get a summary screen here, and then we can just hit launch. So now that product is now spinning up and it's running in the background. So then we want to go over here on the left. We want to go to our products side, products list again. And we want to get back to these products. Make sure we're hitting this top left products, not the admin product list, but the top product list here. Your screen might look different than mine, but we really want that top left product list, which will give us this view here. And now what we want is the container code pipeline project. So this is going to create, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to launch our products. This is going to create this DevOps pipeline that we're talking about. It's going to create the version control, which is Git functionality, just like Bitbucket or GitHub. The Git repo, it's going to create a couple code build projects, a code pipeline to manage it all, some S3 buckets to support it. So there's a lot going on here. We're going to dive through each of the pieces. But really, it's creating that whole pipeline to be able to check code in, validate it, and then deploy it out to our container infrastructure. So one of the last pieces it also creates is the actual container, that Docker image repository in AWS. So it's creating all of that and getting it all ready for our code to be checked into. So I'm just going to call this, this is going to be like a simple calculator API. So I'm just going to call this calc API. We're probably going to use that term a lot in here. So if you're following along, you can use the same term or different if you want. So now we just need to name our repo. So I'm going to call it calc API. And then this is the name of our ECR where that image, that Docker image, is going to live. So I'm going to call everything Calc API today. How's that? So everything's going to, well, I'll just to differentiate it, I'll call this dash repo. We don't need to do any tag options here. We can just next through that. Do not check that. We don't need SNS. Just next and then launch. All right. Okay, so we have a question here. Maybe. Oh, thought I heard a bing on the, oh, that's my other chat thing. Okay. All right, so at this point now we've launched those two products in Service Catalog. We can go over here. So we've got this product list. Now we can go over to provisioned products. And we should see both of those coming up. We've got our cluster coming online and we've got our repo. If you want, you can go up here to services and we can go back to CloudFormation. Keep these windows simple and succinct. And we'll see that Service Catalog is using CloudFormation to launch these products. And we've got a simple little description. We've got our CI/CD automation pipeline, and then we've got our Fargate cluster. So those two products are being launched right now. And we see the same thing going on in Service Catalog. Now, a lot of companies, and this is, we have a lot of spread on what customers, how they end up implementing Service Catalog here, but Service Catalog can be either your end user's main and only gateway into AWS, or it can be one of many things. So we have customers that allow full access to the AWS console, and then we have other customers that allow no access to the AWS console, and in fact would put another ITSM product, maybe ServiceNow or Jira, for example, on top of Service Catalog, so those products end up being the only gateways that their end users have into the AWS ecosystem. So there's a lot of flexibility around how you provide these products to your end users. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is move away from our end users clicking around in the console and just deploying things through the console. And we really want to get to that more prescribed and pre-planned architecture where we're baking in the security, the logging, the auditing abilities. We're putting all that into our templates, and then we hand that off to our users. And really that makes not only our job as the infrastructure engineer or the security officer, it's making that job easier, but it's also making our end users easier. I don't know how many people on the call have spun up a Fargate cluster, but I can tell you it's a lot easier. It's a lot more difficult, to do that through the console than it was just there where you didn't have to know anything. You just pretty much hit launch. A lot of you might not even know what's going on in the background of that. And that's kind of the point with Service Catalog and these immutable infrastructure templates. We want to take a lot of that complexity and reduce it as much as possible from our end users so that they can really get to these resources without needing to know what's in there. And so, and a lot of times that's, they know that it needs to be secured. Well, the Cloud Center of Excellence team, the infrastructure team, has already done that for them and provided them this well-architected template that has everything in there that the IT leadership is wanting. So I'm hoping that I prattled on long enough there that, yeah, our products are now provisioned, at least on my end. So I'm switching back and forth a lot here, so I apologize, and we can answer questions about this if you have questions along the way or as we're going or at the end. I'm switching back and forth between that end user and that admin persona. I'm changing hats kind of sporadically in here, so I'm just trying to give you a full picture of what all is going on in AWS, along with like how the end user is walking through it. So we're kind of walking through two different people's view of the infrastructure. So in this CloudFormation view that I'm in right now, this is really the admin's view of everything that's running as a template in AWS. And if you're 100% infrastructure as code, then this CloudFormation console will actually give you the full picture of what's running in AWS. And that's a spot that a lot of companies are trying to get to. They're trying to get to this point where everything that's running in their cloud system is predefined architecture that they've vetted and pushed out there, and trying to move away from this click around in the console and spin things up. But as we saw, so now I'm switching back to this end user. You don't have to limit the ability of your end users to self-provision these well-architected templates. They can still get that high-speed, on-demand usage of the cloud, and also have all of that predefined templating that we want in place as well. So that's really what Service Catalog allows us to do, is still give that ability of the end user to self-service and terminate and spin things up as they need. But at the same time, we're still governing it, we're still securing it. So that's really what we're seeing here. So now as the end user, we see both of our products are up and running. We have our cluster, if we go in here, and it has a lot of information in here. So we've created a lot of things in the background. We've created a VPC, which is a segregated network setup in the AWS world. We've got a couple subnets that are spanning availability zones. So an availability zone in AWS, we have regions, and then inside of each region, we have at least 2, usually more than that, availability zones inside that region. Now, an availability zone itself is made up of multiple data centers. So availability zones themselves have redundancy built into them, but they show up as one unit in AWS. So what we've got here is we've got a cluster that's spanning 2 subnets across 2 availability zones in what we're using right now, which is our US East 1 region, which is in Virginia. And so we've got, on top of that, we've got some roles that are specific to what we're doing here with the ECS service and task. And then we've also got this load balancer, which is going to be our first level of security. And also if you're familiar with how load balancers work, it's going to be deciding how to route these requests from the internet to our internal services within Fargate in these ECS tasks. So this is really what's getting our private API and exposing it to the internet. Now, most of you in production would be sticking this behind SSL, and you'd probably be adding a security layer on top of it. So for today, we're just going to focus on just getting this up and running with the HTTP side of things. It's not like we're exposing anything terribly secretive or IP material here, but we're setting it up. We've got our load balancer, we've got our service. We're spanning across a couple. Availability zones. So we've got fault tolerance built into this. And the other thing this load balancer is going to do for us is when we make an update to our code. So this is where a lot of people want to be when they're publishing these APIs. I need to be able to not only continuously integrate, which we're going to get into with our CI/CD pipeline here, but we also need to deploy without downtime. So we've also got baked into this load balancer a 0 downtime rolling deployment across our services. So we'll see that in action here in just a little bit. We're going to first publish our code, and then we're going to make an update to it. And we'll see that new Docker image comes online and then swaps out with our service in Fargate. And if you're following along with the API, depending on how fast it happens, you should be able to see those versions run concurrently for a period of time, and then the old version will drop off and the new version is the only thing running. So that's what we're going to see here, and that's where this cluster has created all of this infrastructure here to do all that. We will be coming back to this screen in a little bit. Mainly, we want this external URL at some point, which if we open it now, we're going to get a nice, probably a gateway timed out error or something like that. Because again, we don't have our software running on it yet. So that's to be expected for right now until we get something in there. So that's the infrastructure that our code is going to run on. Now we also want to check our code into something. So this is where this container pipeline project comes in here. And for that, we've got the only output it's showing us here is our Git URL. Which if you're using this might be, depending on people's familiarity with Git, this might be one of the hardest parts of this process. If you're a user that uses Git all the time, this is, you know, your daily activity. This is going to be really easy for you. If you're not familiar with Git, or you don't have, you're not familiar with command line stuff, this is where it might get a little bit challenging for you, is how to actually check the code into Git. I have had people in the past use VS Code, I think, or if you've got Visual Studio on Windows, that's another way. If you've got a UI into Git, then you're going to want to put these details in there. I will be using the Linux subsystem for Windows to do this. I can clear out of here. So we're going to, at this point, we're now going to clone our repo, and we're going to go through the process of getting Git ready, and then we're going to upload our code to that Git repo. And I'm going to walk you through this dev pipeline at this point, because we've got our infrastructure in place, so now it's time to start uploading code. So any questions with anybody here? And I just looked at it. We've consumed a lot of our time here. Are we done at the hour? Was that how long we've got?
Sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute. Yes, we're done at 1 o'clock. So
okay.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Chris, is it all right if I send out in our follow-up an email address for people to reach out to you if they have any further questions?
Yeah, you go ahead and include my email. And then also, so I set these event accounts. They will run for the, I think they run for 6 hours total. I don't know if that's from when I created it or when I started it. So expect it to expire around 6 p.m. Eastern, or maybe a little later than that, if you do want to keep doing this. And then also, before I totally run out, if we go back to this service catalog GitHub repo, again, we're in this ECS section. So there are some instructions down in here, and this is pretty much what we're running through. This does not go into the whole code commit. It's kind of assumed you know how to use Git in here. So I will try to hit that part. I'm going to run through this very quickly here, so we might lose some people on the Git side of this. So I apologize for that. But I'm going to show you very quickly all the pieces you need to do that. So with that in mind, let's do this here. So one of the things we need in order to use code commit in AWS is a user that can access code commit. And we also need a user that has code commit credentials, which is that either SSH or HTTPS credentials. So I'm going to show you how to do that here, assuming you don't have that already. If you're in this reference architecture, we're going to go down to the IAM section. And there will be, if we scroll down here, there's a create code commit user right here. And then I've also linked in here where you can get the user guide on how to set this up. So depending on whether you're using VS Code or you're using a Linux command line or a Mac operating system, I always like to use SSH things, but maybe you want to use one of those. You'll want to set up your credentials, and I'll show you this here. So we're going to go ahead and just create this code commit user. Again, we're using these CloudFormation stacks. So we see, I just right clicked and open that. Doesn't matter the name. You can name it specifically if you want. We're just going to next through this, and then we're going to check our blue boxes like we saw last time. And that should happen pretty quickly here. If you're a compulsive refresher, like I am. All right, I'm going to switch over to IAM. So that's where we need to go next. You go into services and find IAM. That's, if you're not familiar with AWS, that's our identity and access management. So we're going to go into users, and we're going to go into this code commit user here. And we'll see here, it's just given us code commit access. That's the only thing it's got. And we want to go over to security credentials. And we're going to create an access key. Or sorry, what am I saying here? We're going to generate some HTTPS GET credentials here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and download that because we're going to need that here in just a minute. So here, you're going to need both of these. You will need the username and you will need the password, which I just downloaded in my CSV file. So now what we can do is up here, we're going to head over to code commit. We're going to get our clone URL. And we want our username in there. So I've got my username here. Want that @ symbol in there. There. Ah. What's going on?
Hey, Chris,
yeah, I think we're running out of time. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought we could do this in an hour. I should have just run through it there as a demo. I do have this running in an account if people want to see what the end result looks like, but I think we're out of time here, aren't we?
Oh, I wasn't cutting you off. We had a question.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Somebody was asking, where did we get clone URL from again?
Oh, yeah. So if we go up here to services, and then we want to go to...
Oops. Chris, I accidentally muted you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. So if we go in here to services, we're going to code commit. So we want to go there. Nope. There it goes. And inside there, we'll see our repository. So whatever you named that repository when you created the service catalog product, you'll see that. You can either click in it and it'll take you in here and, hey, there's nothing here. That's what we expect. And then you can do this clone HTTPS. So we can do that. And then we come in here, and that's where that URL is coming from. I think what we can do here is actually just do this and then enter our username and password. Well, too many Excel sheets open. So if you downloaded those credentials, we need that. And then we need our password. And we have created an empty repository, and that's kind of what we would expect. So then we can go into the folder where we have created this. And master one. So here's my folder, and we've created this Calc API repo. So we've got an empty folder. So if you downloaded that zip file I sent you, you can just copy everything out of there and drop it off into here. And you'll see everything's in there. So now if we switch over to, we can do a get status, and then we can go get add all, and then we can get push, and we can push. Oh, I missed one, sorry. Need to commit it. So we'll do first. There we go. And now we can push up there. And we got to do our, this is where SSH stuff is a little bit easier. There we go. So now we can switch back to our code commit repo that we were looking at for the clone URL, and we'll see that we've got everything in there. Now, specifically what's going to happen in here is if you go into that code pipeline section, there's 3 files in here: build, deploy, and validate. And it's going to run those in the pipeline here. And I'll show you that right now. So if we're in this developer tools, we can go over here on the left. We can go to pipeline, go to pipelines, our container product pipeline, and we'll see that. And at some point here, the first one should fail. There was no code, so that's to be expected. We just checked in code, so at some point it's going to pick up on that. And then it's going to build it, and then it will validate it. So if it goes through both of those successfully, then it will deploy it. So what's happening in there? We can go into this code pipeline section, and we can look at each one of these steps. Build, in this case, is just calling make all. I'm using a make file to do this. Validate, which is the next step. I've got 2 tests in there. I'm going to test the C, and then I'm going to test the Python, and then deploy. And so this is where you need to make some edits. So initially this will, this is pulling down that Docker, the Docker runtime container. It's going to log us into ECR. Now all of those IAM roles and credentials that we created earlier, that's that permission binding that we created as part of that template. So this is all created with permissions and least permissible requirements to get this all running, but that all happened behind the scenes in that template. And you're more than welcome to go in to serve into the, well, I'll just keep doing this. You can go into the service catalog, reference architecture, and see the templates that created this. So we noticed here in the pipeline, it noticed the commit. It has gone through and it's built it, and that succeeded. So now we're moving into validation. If you do any of these, you can open up the details. And we can see here at some point it's going to run that. We're coming right up on the wire, so we might have just enough time to get this launched as a container. Okay, so there it called the test. It did some simple math and it passed, so we're moving on. So if we close that down, we'll see this get marked green, and then we'll see deploy. And then deploy is going to do some Docker stuff here. We're going to build the Docker image according to our Docker file, and then we're going to tag it, and then down here we're going to push it up to our repo that we created earlier in our service catalog product. And if you want to see that, in case I run out of time here, if you switch over to ECR, Elastic Container Registry, that is our the AWS version of Docker Hub. And we'll see in here, we've got this repository with a URI. If we go in there, once this deploys, we will have an image in there. Now, in order to spin this up as a service, we will need to copy that. We need to go back to Service Catalog, and we need to spin up a service. So we're going to launch our product here. I'm just going to show you this because we're hopefully the image creates in time for me to get this all running. We'll call this our calc service. And here it's going to ask us for that URI. And if you're familiar with Docker or container images, we're also going to want to put that latest tag on there. You could also do a specific version, 1, 2, 3. I think it starts out at version 1. And then we just need a name for it. So I'm just going to call this my calc API. And then we give it a port, and then you can set small, medium, large on the container size. I'm going to leave it as small. And I invite you to go look at the templates to see how we're mapping that, because that actually gets mapped to CPU and RAM for the actual service. So then we can hit next. We don't need any tags. Next, I'm going to hold off on this launch screen and I'm going to go back to our ECR and I'm going to see if our deployment went through, which it did. So now we have our latest URI in there, which also means if I go back to code pipeline, I will see that my deployment completed. So full circle, just in the nick of time, I'm going to launch this. And if you've been following along with me, at some point this will be done. Then we can go over to our provisioned products, go back to that cluster, and in the outputs, we will have this external URL, at which point we will see this come on live once our software. Now, if you want to make a change and see that no downtime deployment, you can go in here to inside that repo, go into Flask. One of the easiest things to do here is just change this application.py and just change this number to version 3.2, and you could give yourself another message if you want. There we go. So then you can check that in. As any developer would do, a super useful comment there, right? And then go through the process all over again. Okay, so at some point we will see this come online. Oh, there it is. So we're online, version 3.1. Then if you still have time, you can follow through here and you can see this whole deployment go through again. If you want to see what's going on in ECS, then go to the ECS console. And we can see here that we have created a cluster, which is one of the first things we kicked off. And inside that cluster is a service that is running. And there's our calc service. And then if we switch over to tasks, this is where we're going to see that zero downtime deploy happen. So here's our task definition. And we'll see that at some point, we're going to get another task. They will be running concurrently, and then it will drain the first task, and the second task will come in and replace it. Oh yeah, and there's not going to be any instances because this is managed by AWS. So that's all the pieces there. I'm sorry I ran over a couple minutes there. So if we have any questions, I can hang out for a bit longer. I don't know about other people, but I'm happy to ask questions or send an email.
We can stay on. We could stay on for a few more minutes in case anybody had questions or, just wanted to, I guess, just hang around to hear anybody else's questions. You are welcome to stay. Otherwise, I know, I know a lot of people might have to roll off. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for doing this demonstration. And this is very interesting stuff. And I know that our members appreciate being able to peek behind the curtain to learn a little bit more about AWS. So thank you so much for being here. I also want to thank everybody. I see a lot of new names on here. If you would like to learn more about Tech Birmingham, we would love to provide more information about our organization and what we provide to our members. If you like stuff like this, please let us know, and we can start setting up more tech-based programming for you all. And if you want to let us know what kind of technology in particular that you would like to learn more about, we will definitely seek out those resources for you. So thank you again. And if you have any questions for Chris, please let us know. He's graciously offered to stick around for a few more minutes to help us. So go.
Yeah, and if you're following the screen still, I'm just letting this code pipeline complete here. Once it deploys, we will see the newer container pop in here. And then at that point, we can switch over here and we can watch that load balancer handle that, that zero downtime handoff between the versions. So any questions on there? And if you like this, I'll also do a little shout out back to the reference architecture here. We have the same thing for Beanstalk. I think we might cover that in another at another talk at some point. But Beanstalk is one of the original services with AWS, and it allows an easily scalable system based off of our EC2 instances. So this might be a good target if you're trying to quickly migrate maybe a monolithic app, especially if you're in the Windows world. But you still want some of that cloud scalability in there. So I've got almost the exact same setup in here for Beanstalk. In fact, you can use this same application that I sent you, can run on Beanstalk as well. Excuse me. You'll have to edit the code pipeline files. Instead of being a Docker build, it'll need to be a Beanstalk build. But you'll see that in there. But it's got the code pipeline and it's got the Beanstalk. So if you're curious about that, and again, it's all running through Service Catalog. So the idea here is that you're able to provide this to your end users. Let me go in here. Maybe I've talked. Okay, good. So now we got our second image is popping in, so we can see in here. I don't think our task has created a second one quite yet. Let's see here if we've got a new version going. Yeah, so it's in the middle of deploying that. But we can see our pipeline has successfully deployed the second version here. So if we go back here, it's probably still running. Oh. Oh, my bad. I know what I did wrong here. One last part for those of you that are still here. We need to go into code pipeline. We need to go into deploy. And we need to supply that service name and cluster name here, and then I'll uncomment this, and that will cause the new deployment. The force new deployment is important there. That'll force the service to kick over. So if you want to see that, I'll leave that as an exercise for you. The service name is, if we go in here, the service name is whatever you set in Service Catalog. So for mine, it's that mycalc API. And then the cluster name, you're going to want this whole string of stuff here. So if you supply both of those in here, you'll be able to check that in, and then you'll see that kick over. Forgot to add that in. We ran out of time. But that's all we've got. If there's no questions, I think we're probably good then. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you. There's also a follow-up, not a follow-up, but another AWS program that will be held. We'll send that in the follow-up. And Chris, you're going to be covering Beanstalk during that one, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so this is with the AWS Birmingham group. I apologize if I've butchered the name of the group, but we will get all of that information for you. I was trying to pull that up so that I can put that in the chat for everybody, but we will get that sent out in our follow-up so that you have information to that event. And other than that, thank you so much, Chris, for being here. And Dion seems to still be having some technical difficulties, so I will just close this out. Again, if you would like to become a member or learn more about membership, please reach out to Rebecca, Dion, or I, and we would love to help you learn more about Tech Birmingham. And Chris, thank you so much for doing this for us again. So, and this will be rebroadcasted later as soon as we get the recording, and we can upload it onto our YouTube channel. And that way you could watch it again and follow along in case you missed any of the steps. And we will also send Chris's contact information in our follow-up email. So thank you again, everybody, for being with us. All right,
Yep.
I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.